Hello, I'm Alfred Weber, and today is Friday, May 27th, 2011, and we'd like to welcome independent scientist Leuren Moret. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be on again.
Yeah, I understand that you have established an expose and managed to expose the Fukushima-HAARP bankers, partners, sponsors, and the money trail behind the Fukushima March 11th tectonic nuclear radiation false flag event, and that will be the subject matter of today's update.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. Please just, take us through it.
In our last interview, we were talking about the Tromsø, Norway HAARP facility and an international consortium of 6 countries that form ISCAT, which was funded by the Wallenberg Foundation in 1974. Now, the HAARP facility in Tromsø, Norway is quite important. It was started very early, 1974, and it consists of 6 countries who own it. Well, the ISCAT is the organization, and it's an international scientific organization, but the HAARP facility at Tromsø, Norway, which came out of that organization, is owned by 6 countries. So it's owned by Britain, and its headquarters are at the University of Lancaster, I believe, and Norway, Sweden, Finland, China, and Japan. So it's a rather eclectic group of countries, and the first thing I asked is, what do they have in common? And what they have in common are the international bankers. And so all of Scandinavia is controlled by the Wallenberg banking family, and this has been for many centuries. Britain and China and Japan are funded by the British bankers, which the public name or the public face on that group of gangsters is the Rothschilds. So that is what the common thread is between those two groups that use this facility. And of course they have other guest countries who can send scientists, but Russia is not a member of this group, despite the fact that the Soviet Union and the United States actually co-developed HAARP together, and the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, where I'm a whistleblower, is the primary institution in the U.S. where the Soviet-U.S. collaboration occurred, as well as our scientists being shipped off to the Soviet Union. And there seems to be quite a lot of collaboration. Now, what I discussed in our interview, the last interview, was that this consortium of countries were actually conducting experiments at the Tromsø, Norway HAARP facility the week before the Fukushima disaster. And I'd like to read a quote by from the Wallenberg Foundation. It says, quote, "Over the years, the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation has been the dominating source of funds for investments in advanced equipment and infrastructures. Hence, the foundation has played a decisive role in many of the infrastructures that Swedish researchers use and for advanced equipment at Swedish universities." So here we see the bankers, the scientists and the universities in Sweden married in this this marriage of common interests, and basically it's about money. So I did get an email. Oh, also the Wallenbergs definitely funded ISCAT and the HAARP facility at Tromsø, Norway. So they have a big involvement. Now I did get an email from a viewer in Denmark just today. This is May 27th. And what he said is a little note on Norway. Hi, Leuren. It is a pretty dire situation indeed. Good to have people like you to talk openly about it. I have an interesting note on the Tromsø observations that you mentioned and the experiments going on there from March 2nd to 9th. I was vacationing in Hemsedal, a ski resort in Norway, from February 20th to 25th. Snowboarding, another passion of mine, and there was some interesting things going on there. First off, there was rainbow-colored My Little Pony clouds every day there. And these are the shimmering clouds that are observed over earthquake zones right before there's a HAARP tectonic earthquake, such as in China before the Olympics. He said it looked like the oil had been poured into the clouds. The weather had also changed from 30 degrees centigrade to 5 to 8 above zero centigrade in less than a week. Pretty incredible stuff. And finally, the wind blew all the snow in 3 days, which of course was a little annoying. So this violent wind blew away all the snow. Tuesday night, there was a beautiful aurora borealis right when the temperature became above zero. And what we do know about HAARP is that it can trigger artificial aurora borealises. He said, unfortunately, I took no pictures of this phenomenon, and I felt like I was the only one noticing. But in terms of hard data, I think it is worth looking at temperature fluctuations in a region like Scandinavia to predict active aurora research. Best, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. That was a very informative email, and it certainly confirms what others have reported and observed at the Tromsø, Norway HAARP facility.
Right. Exactly. And I don't know whether this is a good juncture to mention that, but the Tromsø, Norway HAARP facility has become notorious in our in our line of research. Excuse me, because of a November 9th, 2009 spiral, HAARP spiral that was used that appeared in the sky the night before Barack Obama's quote Nobel Prize in Norway.
Nobel Peace Prize for
Yes.
War.
Yes. But we'll get to more of those connections later. The second matter that I'd like to mention is that Norway, we have reports, and we'll put links to those reports in the article that accompanies this interview, that it is Norway where there is a reported underground facility, deep underground military base, that will accommodate 5 million people. 2.5 million are the technocrats or elites from Norway, and the other 2.5 million are destined for the American, i.e. US, political and economic controllers or elites. I just wanted to come in with that note.
Okay, I'd like to discuss the testimony in the Japanese parliament called the Diet. They called their parliament the Diet on May the 26th, 2011. And this was by Professor Katsuhiko Ishibashi. He is the most famous seismologist and one of the most famous scientists in Japan. And he and I held press conferences a number of years ago on the very same day. He was in Hokkaido at the International Seismological Conference, and I was in Tokyo at the Foreign Correspondents Club. And both of us warned very strongly about the danger of nuclear power plants in Japan and the very large magnitude earthquakes. They have an 8 or greater earthquake every 5 years in Japan. It's completely insane, and almost all of the nuclear power plants are built right on the ocean so they can utilize the cooling water, the seawater, to cool the nuclear power plant. They use huge amounts of cooling water. So, there were 5 points that Professor Ishibashi made as a scholar and recommendations to the Japanese Diet. Number 1, he said that the severe accident at Fukushima was caused by earthquake shocks before the tsunami, and they damaged the pipes and the pumps and things like that, which is easy to understand because in Japanese nuclear power plants, the vibrations of the reactor working would shake the pumps, the cooling pumps apart if they were sitting on the ground. So the pumps are actually hanging from pipes suspended in the air. And it's probably the most dangerous aspect of a nuclear power plant because it is such a perilously fragile way to have a cooling system working in a nuclear power plant. It's crazy. So he said that because the earthquake was so intense, it was a 9.0 or a 9.1, and that released the equivalent of 1 million nuclear bombs, 30 kiloton Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. That's a huge shock wave. And it lasted for 10 minutes. I mean, 3 minutes. The shock waves, not the shock waves, but the seismic waves were very violent and lasted for 3 minutes, which is very long. And they exceeded the planned and tested safety limits of reactors number 2, 3, 5, and they were shaken in an east-west direction very violently, and that is the direction that exceeded the safety limits that had been designed in the engineering of the buildings. Now, in 2009, NISA, which is the Nuclear Inspection Safety Agency, and the Atomic Energy Commission had inspected all the nuclear power plants, all the reactors at Fukushima, and declared that they were safe. But Ishibashi said to the Diet, this is not true. And he said it is wrong, so they need to redo the entire nuclear safety process in Japan. In other words, the regulatory agencies are focusing on the danger of the tsunami and disregarding the danger of the earthquake and the seismic trauma to the facility or to all the nuclear power plants in Japan. And he emphasized this over and over again in all of his points. Um, and now I know why the NISA is focusing on the tsunami instead of the earthquake. It's because Japan is sitting on 4 colliding plates, and there's nothing but faults under Japan. So actually, there shouldn't be any nuclear power plants there. It's far too dangerous. So his second point in his testimony to the Diet was that on March 30th, NISA instructed, now this is a government agency, instructed electric power companies to take emergency measures against tsunamis. But this is wrong for one reason, because they ignored number one, the danger, the extreme danger of the earthquake, which happens before the tsunami. And his number two point is that NISA instructed electric companies to assume the tsunami caused the loss of power, and that it would cause accidents in all the Japanese nukes. So Professor Ishibashi said it's crazy to put nukes and power plants where big tsunamis occur if it's only to generate electricity. They're much safer places and much safer ways to generate electricity, and they shouldn't have nuclear power plants in Japan sitting on the ocean where big tsunamis and earthquakes occur. So then his third point was in reference to the Niigata earthquake in 2007, and that was the caused by an earthquake in the Chuestu offshore fault zone in Niigata Prefecture. It's a submarine fault system, which is right where China is subducting under Japan. So there's a lot of stress and strain built up and a lot of activity on that fault zone. Now, the offshore major plate margin tectonic faulted zone was completely ignored by TEPCO. It's a 36-mile fault zone. But scientists, Japan's best scientists, had warned TEPCO and the government about how dangerous that fault zone was. So guess what TEPCO did? They only looked at a very small part of that 36-kilometer zone where there was less activity, and they assumed that the maximum earthquake magnitude would be a 7 earthquake at the max. Now, that was completely ridiculous when you look at what a violent fault zone that is. And Niigata, of course, is the foreshadowing event for Fukushima, which is exactly on the opposite side of the island of Honshu. They're just, one is on the China Sea and one is on the Pacific Ocean. His fourth point, now this is really interesting. The Japanese islands, he said, are most unsuitable to build nuke plants. Of all the places in the world, the Japanese archipelago is the worst place because Japan only has 0.3% or 0.3% of the world landmass, but they have 10% of the world's earthquakes, and they have a magnitude 8 or greater every 5 years. It's an insane place to put a nuclear power plant. France, Germany, and the US, he made this point, would never build nuclear power plants in Japan. And he said France and German plants are different from Japanese nukes. He said Japanese nuclear power plants come with major earthquakes. And his fifth point was that regulations and guidelines, even if they shut down all the nuclear power plants or they continue to operate some of them, the regulations and guidelines for handling and storage of nuclear waste from these plants must all be revised now. And in fact, Japan does not have an underground nuclear repository. It doesn't have a repository. I've been to some of the proposed repositories and held town hall meetings there and met with the TEPCO scientists, and they were all lying. And then I saw the guest book at Mizunami City, which is in Gifu Prefecture. I was invited to go and spend a week there by the citizens. They'd never had a foreigner at a town hall meeting, and I went to one every day. And in the guest book, I was astounded to see scientists from all over the world who had visited the Mizunami City site location for this underground nuclear repository. Now, the scientists for TEPCO told me this was an underground laboratory. And when I saw all those names, and I even knew some of them were from the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, I said it's impossible that this is a site for an underground laboratory. These people are all into nuclear waste, and you're just lying to me and these people. And then he invited me to come and ride with him separately in his car, and all the citizens would walk to this mine, basically, that they were turning into would like to turn into a nuclear waste repository. And as soon as I got in the car, he said, please don't tell the people anything. Please don't tell them don't tell them the truth. And I said, I'm gonna not only gonna tell them the truth, but I'm gonna tell them you told me not to. And on the day that I was leaving, the citizens took me to the train station, the railroad station, and they said, "Oh, look, there's our mayor." And I had met with him twice already, and he assured us this was not a nuclear waste repository. And they said, "Look, he's getting on the train." And I said, "Where's he going?" And they said, "He's going to Yucca Mountain." Yucca Mountain is the underground nuclear waste repository I worked on in Nevada. And it's a total pile of scientific garbage. And a judge ordered the researchers who've been working 50 years on an underground repository in the US to abandon all of the bad science they had conducted and start all over again, throw everything in the garbage can. So, um, that is the story about nuclear waste, and that is a very good warning by Professor Ishibashi. And I think he made excellent points to the Diet. Whether they continue to consider those or not, I don't know, but they will be very unwise not to listen to their scientists. They have some of the best scientists in the world. And so then I would like to talk about two very important scientists who've done a very important study. It's called The Current Status of Seismo-electromagnetics for Short-Term Earthquake Prediction. And this is in a book, a journal called Geomatics, Natural Hazards and Risk. And what these two scientists produced in this paper that was published in 2010, April of 2010, June of 2010, is that they looked at earthquakes in Japan, in the United States, and in Southeast Asia. And they did a complete analysis using the scientific method. They identified two types of earthquakes. Earthquakes that were known and reported before, and earthquakes more recently that have a premonitory ULF, ultra low frequency signal that they can detect, or that has been transmitted and picked up, identified by the seismologists. Now, they put them on a graph, and um, it was very interesting because some of the earthquakes that have this ULF signal before the actual earthquake event, some of them were in Japan. One of them was related to that Niigata foreshadowing event. And One of them was the Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco, which we knew the Navy was involved in, and we suspected it was a HAARP event. And I've forgotten when it, 19, about 1986 or 88 is when it happened. And that earthquake actually caused a collapse of part of the San Francisco Bay Bridge. So that was quite a large earthquake also. And so here I looked at this graph and I said, that's really interesting. So I kept reading. And they also took the signals, the electromagnetic frequencies that were transmitted or that they picked up before this ULF suspected, well, it was an ULF signal earthquake in the northwest part of Japan. And what they did was they separated the sound into four directions, the magnitude of sound from north, south, east, and west. And they looked at it for a whole month before the earthquake, and then for several weeks after, and even 2 years after. And what they discovered is that there was no change in the magnitude of sound over time from three directions, but there was a lot of change in the fourth direction. And they triangulated that and discovered that it was being transmitted from a particular transmitter on the west coast of Japan. So that was very interesting. Another one they looked at with an ULF signal was exactly in between the transmitter and the Niigata earthquake location. So there is a lineup with a foreshadowing earthquake before the Niigata earthquake, and it's right in the same line of sight. So the third analysis they did was to plot earthquakes with ULF signals and without ULF signals in Southeast Asia. So this would be in Borneo, the Philippines, that part of Southeast Asia. And they were interested in that spot because it's directly in line between an earthquake, a transmitter in the south part of Japan that they were also able to show it triggered the Kobe earthquake. And this transmitter was in a straight line with a transmitter on the northwest coast of Australia. And so there were natural earthquakes in Southeast Asia in that same zone of influence between those two transmitters in Japan and Australia. But there were also ULF earthquakes in that zone as well. So clearly, this is collaboration between countries who have ULF transmitters, and this is also um, entities or whoever is doing this is actually triggering these earthquakes in their own country. Makers, partners, sponsors, money trail behind Fukushima-HAARP. So, are we ready, Alfred? Okay. So, um, that's a very interesting question. And what I did is I got a 1999 European Union report with highlights on their concern about HAARP as an environmental weapon, a military weapon, and also the attribute known as mind control, which is part of the HAARP weapon system. And I'd like to read this from the European Parliament report. Their point number 11 says, regards the U.S. military ionospheric manipulation system HAARP based in Alaska, which is only a part of the development and deployment of electromagnetic weaponry for both external and internal security use as an example of the most serious emerging military threat to the global environment and human health, as it seeks to interfere with the highly sensitive and energetic section of the biosphere for military purposes, while all of its consequences are not clear, and calls on the Commission, Council, and the member states to press the U.S. government and Russia and any other state involved in such activities to cease them, leading to a global convention against such weaponry. And point number 12 of concern to the European Parliament calls in particular for an international convention for a global ban on all research and development, whether military or civilian, which seeks to apply knowledge of the chemical, electrical, sound vibration, or other functioning of the human brain to the development of weapons which might enable any form of manipulation of human beings, including a ban on any actual or possible deployment of such systems. It also calls for a mutual policy on nuclear science and the measurements to be taken, other measurements to be taken. So here's the usual policy again, just revealing part of the problem as a fear-mongering tool, and then immediately connecting the solution, which is worldwide regulation. This document also refers to Agenda 21, by the way, and it is rather old, from 1999. So in the meantime, most of the things that are proposed here have already been implemented and are fully operational. So it's just sort of a wink and a nod about things they're concerned about, and then they give them the green light to go on. So, so the money trail, the Swedish and the European Union are very, very involved in all of this. And the money trail takes us to the Swedish Research Council's Guide to Infrastructure. And this totally describes how Swedish and European money will be spent up to 2020. It's a pan-European project that is being led by the British and the Swedish. And until I discovered more information about the Tromsø, Norway site and involvement, I did not know that Sweden and Scandinavia was so heavily invested in these in this HAARP technology and weapon system. But now I understand why. In recent years, several major time-limited investments have been made. In other words, by the Swedish Foundation for Strategic Research and the Wallenberg Foundation, those are the bankers, to support the development, in other words, fund them, of core facilities, and in particular in genomics, proteomics, and biological imaging. So this is not just science for fun. This is funding science for very, very, very hidden and dark purposes. And the agenda is very clearly total control of humanity and genocide of much of the population of this world, of this planet. In recent years, several major time-limit investments have been made, in other words, by the Swedish Foundation for Strategic Research and the Wallenberg, as I mentioned. The facilities available in Sweden, as well as those being developed, should be organized and shaped into national resource centers that can serve researchers' needs for highly specialized expertise in various technical fields. scientific and economic long-term perspectives, and continuous improvement of technology and expertise are needed for the operation and development of these facilities. Now, this is very interesting. This is part of the trail. Very important part of the trail. Collaboration between the Swedish Research Council, universities and university colleges, county councils, that means county governments, and other funding bodies is necessary for continued success. So there is the trail of involvement. It's the Swedish Research Council, universities and university colleges, city governments and county governments, and other funding bodies, in other words, sources of money. So that's quite significant. There is a need, it goes on to say, to prioritize the core facilities that will be needed to secure Sweden's long-term competitiveness in biomedical and life sciences. The Swedish Research Council intends to investigate this area further. And then it goes on to mention ESO, which is the European Southern Observatory. This is where they bring in other countries, a European organization for astronomic research that operates large observatories in Chile and is participating in constructing ALMA. It's a very, very large antenna that's bigger than any that has ever been constructed. They're going to put it in Chile. And Sweden is one of 12 member nations involved in that. So there are the fascist partners: Britain, Sweden, the Netherlands, the US, and in South America, Brazil, Peru, Argentina. These countries all have HAARP facilities in them. And that's what they're talking about in this collaboration effort. They're talking about HAARP facilities.
So what you're saying is that you're making a correlation in this network between what? Between a worldwide Nazi network and the HAARP facilities? Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying. This is a Zionist fascist partnership, and it's to plunder countries' resources, third world countries, weaker countries. It's also to carry out a global genocide against not only people living in third world countries, but as we see now from the hidden intent of the Fukushima tectonic nuclear warfare, a new kind of warfare, it's all of North America that is being attacked with this nuclear war. Covert nuclear war on Obama's shift. It's on his watch that this is happening. And he is certainly involved, as well as the Queen of England, the British, the Swedes, and other countries. Japan and even China and Japan were involved in that HAARP experiment at the Tromsø, Norway facility. So it's clearly, it's not a military battle with other militaries. It's countries targeting their own citizens. That's the warfare now.
Right, and in terms of the controllers, if you the countries mentioned that you've mentioned, the UK, Sweden, the Netherlands, in South America, Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, you mentioned.
Yeah, those are all Nazi havens. The Bushes and Ted Turner and the Rockefellers have been involved in them.
Yeah.
And also Namibia in South Africa.
Now, those countries are seeking, historically attempted to implement kind of a a race-based uh, um, a race-based paradigm. The UK, I know for a long time, they're kind of the blonde countries. I'm surprised that Germany's not there.
Oh, Germany's involved too, but I haven't figured out how yet. I haven't teased that out. That would be more through the European Union, I think.
Right.
It's a different tradition.
But the elites in Norway, in particular, from our research, are very much involved by the evidence in the construction of DUMBs, deep underground military bases, for the survival of Bilderberg-type elites in the case of manufactured or other catastrophes on the planet. The one underground base for the survival of Norwegian and U.S. political and financial controllers is in Norway, and that's where the seed bank funded by Monsanto and the Microsoft founder Bill Gates and his billionaire pals is as well. So this is kind of all New World Order partnerships and networks interfaced with Nazi networks as far as the controlling networks in these areas.
I like to call them fascists. They're fascists.
Fascists, right.
Yeah, but they're really monarchists. They believe that they have the divine right to rule over everybody in the world, and they have for many centuries funded the defeat of democratic movements and democratically elected leaders. They're terrified of the movements for self-determination.
Right. Now, we're moving.
It's nothing new.
Yeah. We're about 2/3 way through the segment, so we have about 20 minutes left, and I wanted to get into some of the ins and outs, how the United Nations and various bloodlines fit into the Agenda 21 and the connection to the Wallenbergs. Maybe you could follow, and the Secretary General of the UN, maybe you could follow through with some of that research.
Yeah, yes. Well, it's very interesting that Kofi Annan was Secretary of the United Nations. What country is he from? I've forgotten.
I'm not. I couldn't tell you.
But he actually married a Wallenberg, and she is the niece of Raoul Wallenberg, who disappeared in World War II. And he was making passports and actually selling them to Jews in Germany who wanted to escape. He was selling them passports. And they've made a huge deal out of him being such a hero saving Jews in World War II in Germany when he was, I believe he was an ambassador or a UN official. Was the UN part of World War II?
No. So no. He must have had some other status.
He had a diplomatic status, and so Kofi Annan married his niece. You don't get to just marry a Rothschild or a Wallenberg because you think it's a good idea or you fall in love. There had to be a hidden agenda behind this. Now, while he was Secretary General, Agenda 21 was being laid out and carried out and implemented. Now, what we know about the Wallenbergs through some of the companies they own and what they've done with them is that they are very heavily involved in carving up Africa, and they have been for some decades. The Lunden, I believe it's pronounced Lunden, oil company, the Lundens, who started that oil company in the 1930s in Sweden, are partners with the Wallenbergs in genocide in African countries where they are stealing the oil and other resources. So there's a dirty partnership there. The Wallenbergs also were involved in nuclear power, and they have a company called ABB. It was a company where they had their nuclear power, and the um, they sold it. They sold it just a few years ago to General Electric, and that's of course the Rockefellers. But now they're in the business of electric grids. That's really interesting. I was wondering where in the world are they going to be selling these electric grids, since most of the world has their grids already. I guess third world countries. And they are heavily funding, the Wallenbergs are heavily funding research on fusion. So this is a new energy source. And they're involved with CERN, the largest collider. So far, it's Big Science, which is located in Sweden. And actually, the Japanese competed very hard for it, as well as the US. And they were going to put it near UC Davis in Northern California, where I was a grad student, underground. And it's a huge collider, miles and miles across. Now, through this ABB company, they are also involved in weapons manufacturing. I mean, really heavy weapons manufacturing. In fact, they have designed the most lethal fighter jet on this planet. I wonder if they're using it in Libya. Um, and then I was thinking about why all of a sudden have all these smart meters appeared in Sweden. First they appeared in Indonesia about 10 years ago. I had an Indonesian friend who told me, oh yeah, they ran up all the electricity rates, bills really high, and they would falsely charge people for extra electricity that they hadn't really used, but the meters said that they had consumed it. He said, but for every trick like that, there's always a trick to counteract it. And he said, so we have these devices that just run the meters backwards. So that was pretty interesting. Now, in this week, I've had a smart meter put on the house where I live in Berkeley. They're installing them all over the Bay Area, and they started in Marin County first, which is a wealthy county north of San Francisco. And the residents were
for people who don't know what a smart meter is, could you just briefly tell us what it is?
Well, instead of a meter man coming around and reading people's meters once a month, these smart meters can actually transmit frequencies to and from the meter, and so it's probably through cell phone antenna networks, so they can remotely read the meters without ever having to go out to the house.
Right.
And of course, they can alter whatever the meter is claiming the electricity use was. They can just alter it. And Marion Falk, who is the Manhattan Project scientist who made the hydrogen bomb work, he's also my mentor for the last 12 years. He took me outside his house with a little $10 Radio Shack battery-powered AM radio, and he pulled the antenna out, and he waved it around the sides of the smart meter, and you could pick up the transmissions. You could tell where the transmitter and receiver was on the meter. So they are definitely transmitting to and from these smart meters. Who would ever trust them? And then I was just talking to a friend in New Zealand last night, and he said they came to install a smart meter on his house, and he said he dressed up kind of like a normal person, kind of, like a farm person or something, and kind of acted kind of dumb. And he said to the meter man, "Oh, could I come and watch you do that? I'm just really interested with this wonderful new technology." And so they were talking, and he said the meter man connected a coaxial cable to the meter, which directly connected it to the internet. And the meter man said they can monitor second by second the electrical use and consumption. So these smart meters and these new electrical grids the Wallenbergs are involved in, and the funding for fusion research at some of the biggest research institutes in the world, it's all involving the Wallenbergs. So clearly, um, energy is one of their top priorities.
Right. Now, who are some of the behind the scenes sponsors? The Royals, you know, that that level.
Yes, for sure. I know a number of people have told me that the Wallenbergs are in some way related to the Swedish royal family, and they have intermarried at some level. Now, this marriage of Prince William to Kate Middleton is a similar marriage because Kate Middleton, her mother's last name is Goldsmith, and the Goldsmiths are the Jews who were involved in banking and lending and usury, and there is a Goldsmith family intermarried with the Rothschilds in the city of London, who came to England in the 1700s with the Rothschilds from Germany. They were bankers in Germany. And so basically, very few people know this, but Queen Elizabeth is a Jew. And she's a practicing Christian, but she's actually a Jew. And Kate Middleton is now the Duchess of Cambridge, is a practicing Christian, but because her mother is Jewish, she is Jewish. And this is very interesting. It's a intermarriage now with the bankers who are Jews, although they're not really practicing the Jewish faith in a correct way, are intermarrying with the royal houses, the nobility of Europe. And this is really not a surprise, because look at what they're doing. They're running HAARP facilities, and they're running a global genocide, and they're plundering resources all over the world together, so they might as well be intermarried. Now, let's go back to a French king who had borrowed a tremendous amount of money from the Knights Templars, who were the Crusaders, one group of Crusaders who came back from the Crusades and had a lot of land donated to them in Europe to support and fund the Crusades to the Middle East. Now, the Crusaders claimed, and probably many of them believed, they were going to capture the holy relics of Christianity in the Middle East, but in fact the hidden agenda was to revive and capture the revenue from the Silk Road. It was an economic benefit, just like all their other deceptions. And the Knights Templars brought back Middle Easterners called the Morets. That is where my name came from. My family is one of them. And these were probably mostly people in Palestine who were the most educated people in the Middle East, and they still are. And the Morets were stonemasons, they were architects, they were artists, they were medical doctors and scientists. And the Knights Templars brought them back to Europe to help develop the properties they owned, and they built the big hospitals. The Morets built big hospitals for the Knights Templars. Um, the protective services of firemen came to be through the Knights Templars and the Morets, and that is why the firemen have the Cross of Malta as their official symbol. And so this French king had borrowed so much money he could never pay it back to the Knights Templars banks in France. He said, well, my God, I have a huge army. I'll just go take over their bank, kick them out of the country. In fact, I'll just exterminate them, and then I'll steal all the money that's in their bank. And so he got his army together and went to the bank. Well, it was empty. The Knights Templars had been tipped off. They removed all their wealth from it, and of course the King of France could never catch up with them because they had a bigger navy that was all over the place. How would the king ever know where they were? And a bigger armies than the king had. So he issued an edict, an order to all to kings all over Europe to kill all the Morets and Knights Templars in their countries. Well, the Templars and the Morets had put the kings on their thrones, loaned them money, funded them, and then protected them with their armies and navies to keep them on the throne. So the kings of Europe were very reluctant to honor this request by the French king to exterminate the people who had made them. And so he killed about 300 or 500 Knights Templars and Morets in France, but then he abandoned that plan. And the reason my family came from Switzerland is because Switzerland was the only country in Europe that would give them refuge from the purges and the murders and everything. And so many Knights Templars and Morets ended up in Switzerland. Now, I want to mention that Robert Cecil, who was Lord Burleigh, delivered the throne of Tudor England to the Order of Malta's House of Stuart. So Princess Diana's family were actually derived their power from Malta, the Order of Malta, which today is very much alive, and it represents Dope Incorporated. And so that is why the Queen of England, the Windsors, wanted Prince Charles to intermarry with the Stuarts, because now they have the Windsor blood, they have the Battenberg blood and other Coburg Saxe, and now they have also the Plantagenets, and with Princess Diana, they had a direct Stuart line in their bloodline now. And now they brought the Goldsmiths in. Now, the Plantagenets ruled England in the 1400s, well, for a very long time. And that's actually what the Da Vinci Code is about. It's about the Plantagenets. In 1900, they were removed, their family lines and family tree and their noble lines were removed from the Book of Debrets and the two books in England that are for the aristocracy to identify their bloodlines. And they also quit using the name Plantagenet. Now, that's very interesting because today there are 42 Plantagenets who do not use their name, are not identified as Plantagenets in the House of Lords. So this is another hidden ruling center that we don't know about that is involved in HAARP and all of these weapons of mass destruction that are for plundering and genocide. Now,
so actually, one of the ruling bloodlines responsible for the genocide might very well be the invisible Plantagenet bloodline. Is that what
That's
you're saying? Okay.
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yes. Now let's go on to politicians and elections. Those were kings who were appointed and supported and funded by the Knights Templars and the Morets. Now, a modern king, I think we could say, is Obama. And Obama was funded, the first funder of his presidential election was the British Crown, and that means the City of London bankers, the Rothschilds and the Goldsmiths. And they gave him $500 million to start his presidential campaign. That's a hell of a lot of money. Then, as his campaign got ramped up, the nuclear power industry out of Chicago funded more than any other single donor, as they always do in presidential campaigns, and also the party for the Prime Minister of Japan. They fund the party they want in power because they appoint the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister they want is the party that gets funded by the nuclear power industry in Japan. Now, the day, as you mentioned, that Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize for War, a huge spiral was seen over the Tromsø-HAARP facility. And of course, just a couple of days ago, the Queen of England had an absolutely huge banquet and welcome for the Obamas. Over 171 people were invited to that banquet, and the Queen wined and dined the Obamas the whole time they were there. They met with David Cameron, who is also a relative of Queen Elizabeth. He's the Prime Minister now, but he is one of these families of Jews who intermarried with aristocrats and with royal family members. And what's really interesting is that David Cameron's wife is from the family, also another family, intermarried aristocrats and Jews.
Just
her,
so people,
wait just a minute, wait a minute. And her family built and owned and sold Buckingham Palace to the British royal family.
Yeah. Now, I'm in Canada, and they have very strict laws here against hate speech, and they are selectively enforced. It's enforced by anyone who criticizes anyone of Jewish ancestry. So I want to know what the significance is of your mentioning these particular bloodlines, so that we can see that it's not hate speech that you're engaging in.
Oh, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with occupations. And so basically it's bankers marrying rulers, marrying into power centers, and they mutually benefit each other. It's just a business deal. It has nothing to do with religion.
Okay, good. Now, I also wanted to point out that concurrent with the banquet, Obama was the only U.S. president who has been permitted to give an address in Westminster Hall, and the only three modern personages who have given an address in Westminster Hall are the Pope, the Queen, and Obama. And the Pope and the Queen did so under the secret Treaty of Verona, by which the Pope is given global power over the Queen. And so this means that Obama is actually an actor under the secret Treaty of Verona in some significant way. We recently interviewed an expert on hermeneutics who indicated that the occultic side of the sort of the Queen. This is for the hidden codes in the Old and New Testament indicated that Obama, there's a belief that Obama may have a biblical role as an actor in kind of a joint US-UK alliance known as the Two-Horned Beast, which is not very favorable for the population of humanity
I
over the
think
next
we're running
5
out of
years.
time, Alfred.
No, we have time. We have
Okay.
time. Yeah, so I wanted to note that it's important. It's very important because you brought up Project Bluebeam, which is the use of HAARP to create kind of interdimensional or supernatural events, like
Anagram or holograms.
like the spiral over over the Nobel Peace Prize, which disinformationalists in the exopolitical community said that that was the extraterrestrials, or people would say it was God or some greater thing, so that we have an anointing of Obama as a God king inside these very high bloodlines. You're dealing here with Oni members who are signatories to the secret, who are in line with signatories to the secret Treaty of Verona, namely the Pope and the Queen, and Obama speaking in this hall. And I think it's important to note that in the scale of events which are occurring.
Yeah, but he's not a bloodline. He's a pawn. These people are all pawns.
No, through his mother, he's a bloodline.
Okay, so what I want to do is go to the Queen of England's Knights of the Round Table.
Okay.
And these are Americans who have been knighted by Queen Elizabeth, which is not allowed under the U.S. Constitution. Sir George Herbert Walker Bush, and he was knighted for his work to further the agenda of Dope Incorporated under the cover of the Vietnam War, and that was to secure new opium and heroin sources. In other words, the foothills of the Himalayas, where the opium poppies thrive and grow the best. And that's also why we're in Afghanistan now. And also, in Gulf War I, he introduced depleted uranium weapons for the first time on the battlefield. And the Carlyle Group, which he helped to set up and establish, actually made their first big pile of money on depleted uranium, promoting it and selling it and manufacturing it for use for introduction in Gulf War I. And of course, they've been using it in Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya now. They used it in Grenada. They're using it on Mindanao in the Philippines. They even used it in Japan and Korea. It's a depopulation weapon. And then Queen Elizabeth knighted Sir General Colin Powell, and that was a reward for Gulf War I, which he participated in, and also he's always been the one to clean up political messes and to sanitize events that were very unsavory. So he was rewarded also for the depleted uranium introduced in Gulf War I. And Sir General Schwarzkopf, that was again Dope Incorporated reward for Gulf War I and depleted uranium and grabbing all the oil there. And then Sir General Tommy Franks was also knighted by Queen Elizabeth for Gulf War II, and that was involving Dope Incorporated. And more importantly, the British were defeated and had to leave Iraq in about 1918 or 1919. And they were defeated by the wild tribes, as uh, um, Churchill described them, the wild tribes in Fallujah. And so Sir General Tommy Franks and General Abazayed and there was another General Natansky, I believe. They just annihilated Fallujah, completely nuked it with more weapons than we even know. Fourth generation nuclear weapons, dime weapons, and depleted uranium. It's just completely annihilated that population. So we know who the Knights of the Queen's Round Table are. They're the soldiers who carry out all these genocidal policies. But soldiers have two jobs: to kill lots of people and to destroy things. But the question is, as you point out, what is the future role of Obama? Because he has had a helicopter ride from Chicago, from not ever doing very much, to the highest position in the United States government, but it looks like he's headed for a world government role, and I just can't wait to see what his new job is.
Right. It's the one world government coming up, and there was one analyst who's noted that there's now an attempt to trace back Prince William's and through his Duchess bloodline back to King David, so that he will be the future king of the world under the one world government, because it has to be a Jewish king, and in conjunction with political Zionism. And I don't think that's hate speech. That's political analysis, and that it could be. This is all speculation. That Obama or someone like Obama would be president of the one world government. Certainly, one could see how giving the speech in Westminster Hall with the Pope and with the Queen, his next stop would be president of the one world government. So these are all the future moves of the New World Order, but it is Obama as a tool of the nuclear industry that appears to be carrying out and facilitating the nuclear genocide, the radiation genocide of North America. And many people have been asking about all these tornadoes over North America, and I hope that we'll be able to do a show on that soon.
Oh, for sure. I'd like to just say that I don't like to guess about things. I like to report what I know and what I do research on. And I guess it's because I'm a scientist. But I would like to say that Obama has been carrying out the goals and the strategic execution of activities that promote Agenda 21, and that is land grabs, plundering resources, and genocide. So he may have a position or role under Agenda 21 or as the head of the UN, but I'm sure when he leaves the White House, he will not just retire and go home and watch baseball and sports from a couch. I think he's going to be on the world stage.
Yeah, we'll see. People always said that of Bill Clinton, and look what happened to him. So he's just a gangster in the private sector now.
They're all gangsters.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't get to be head of the UN or that kind of a role. But at least Obama this week is being anointed, treated as the anointed one, or as Oprah Winfrey said in her Audate campaign support, the one. Well, thank you very much, Leuren, for this and for these ongoing updates on the continuing radiation war that we've been under because of the Fukushima event, and tracing back just who is behind this. And we look forward to your next update.
It's certainly been very interesting, and I'm so happy the audience that we have and the viewers are interested in this material. It's, after all, the truth. And as Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Fiction, after all, has to make sense. And I'd also like to say one more thing. Do you know why the sun never sets on the British Empire?
Tell me.
Who would trust an Englishman in the dark?
Perfidious Albion, is that it? Well, on that note, India should know. India should know, because they were a country that was impoverished by the British.
India does know, and they laugh the hardest at that joke.
And I think that we should report to our listeners that the Times of India, which is one of the largest newspapers in the world and a premier newspaper of India with a circulation of over 8 million people, have been putting these broadcasts that you're listening to now and the accompanying articles on their front page. So India, which is cognizant of the depleted uranium and the radiation genocide going on, is listening to these, and the Times of India is listening, and they're mainstream in a nation of 1 billion persons. So don't think that this is just, you're not alone now. India's with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, until the next one.